For a lot of people, when you think of classical music, you think of beautiful symphonies composed somewhere in Europe hundreds of years ago. So you might be surprised when I tell you that in a couple of weeks' time, the Toowoomba Concert Orchestra is performing a concert which will include the world premiere of a work called Toowoomba for Symphonic Impressions, a work written by local composer Rhoderick McNeil, who is, I might add, very much alive and well. Claire Nicholls is Toowoomba Concert Orchestra president. She joins me now. Claire, good morning.
Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm very, very well. This is fantastic. Before we talk about this locally written and locally produced piece, though, tell me about the Toowoomba Concert Orchestra itself. How long has it been around and performing?
Yeah, Toowoomba Concert Orchestra is now in its 47th year of serving the local Toowoomba musicians and audiences. We currently play at the Empire Theatre in Toowoomba, which we are very lucky to have a partnership with. And it's completely comprised of amateur and semi-professional musicians. So we're not a paid orchestra, we're all volunteers, very enthusiastic. And we have a membership of around 57 people.
And what, all ages or
All ages, yeah. So we've got people who are in high school, we've got people who are retired, we've got folks who are local working professionals, we've got folks who are mums and dads. And that's actually something that the research that I've done tells us is actually really special about community orchestras. It makes us really relatable to audiences, which helps them to perhaps see orchestral music not as this big classical hoity-toity thing, but something that's really relatable.
It's fascinating. Because I must admit, I hadn't heard all that much about the orchestra, and this is, I guess, because Toowoomba has so many musical groups that I guess you all sort of fight for space. But that begs the question, I'm assuming that do you have members that are also members of the municipal band and members of the different RSL bands and that sort of thing, because sometimes musicians just can't get enough of the opportunity to play. Is that the case?
Absolutely. I think that's the beautiful thing about music, is that it is a wonderful addiction to have. And the joy of sharing music with others and the joy of being part of something that's bigger than yourself and being in community with people, not only as friends, as acquaintances, but being able to share music making together is actually something really special, and it's something that we really, our orchestra really enjoys doing with our audiences, who we see very much as co-music makers with us, as opposed to a passive bunch of folk who just happen to buy tickets.
Sure. It's a lovely sentiment. That sounds great. If you've just come in, by the way, at 7 to 7, I'm having a chat to Claire Nicholls this morning. Claire is Toowoomba Concert Orchestra president, and they have a show coming up on Saturday, July 22nd. And let's talk about that now, Claire, at the Armitage Centre at the Empire Complex. How did you and the orchestra end up with a bona fide new classical work written by a Toowoomba local and inspired by this part of the world? How did that end up on your music stands? Tell me.
Yeah, well, as you said earlier, it is really quite a treat to be able to work with a living composer. A lot of music that orchestras play usually is by dead white European guys. So to work with a local live composer is really quite a treat. So Rod McNeil was, he's retired now from UniSQ, was a professor of music and music theory, music composition at UniSQ. And he just so happened to come to one of our concerts. And he has a relationship with he's a past teacher of our conductor, Matthew Henry. And we caught up with him after the concert, and we said, we were doing another set of concerts at the time. We were doing our children's concerts, our free children's concerts that we do in September. Yep. And we said, I just flippantly said, we really need a piece of music for this particular part of the story. He says, "Oh yeah, I can have a crack at that." So the next morning, I didn't think of anything of it, but the next morning he sent through a sketch of this piece of music that was just perfect for that particular part of the story that we were telling. And then from there, Matt and Rod had some discussions, and Rod decided that he'd love to write this piece of music specifically for our orchestra.
Isn't that brilliant? That would be the equivalent for a community orchestra of winning lotto, I would imagine.
Absolutely. As you can imagine, being a community orchestra, we're reliant on the musicians that choose to be part of our orchestra. So, for example, there are years where we don't have, at the moment, for example, we don't have the 8 cellos that a symphony orchestra would usually have, or we don't have the 4 double basses that an orchestra would have. But Rod was able to listen to what we had available, where our strengths were in our wind sections, where we need repertoire that will suit the playing abilities of different sections within the orchestra. And he was able to take that information and compose this absolutely stunning piece of music that takes inspiration from Toowoomba.
That is terrific. And I love the way you put it, certainly with the piece that you needed on that day that you first met him. Probably took him longer to put together the 4 Symphonic Impressions Toowoomba piece, but the other one, he just knocked something together overnight and had it to you by the next day. I mean, most of us mere mortals we'd be hard-pressed putting together a piece of flat-pack furniture overnight, let alone a piece of music. He's obviously a fairly talented fellow and very organised.
Very much so, and he's captured Toowoomba so beautifully. So there's actually 4. It's a 4-movement piece, which means that there's 4 sections that sort of hang together as a collective theme. So we start at dawn at Picnic Point with this absolutely beautiful, lilting sort of folk Irishy, Celtic-y melody.
Yeah.
We then head on to Graduation at the Empire Theatre, which, as you can imagine, is very stately and
it's very grand or very important. Yes.
And that's beautifully contrasted by the next work, which is about St. Luke's Church, about a sanctuary of peace, which just has this most profound stillness about it. You can almost imagine the dust motes coming through the stained glass windows. And then he finishes it all off so beautifully with a real celebration based on the Carnival of Flowers. And then finishing the whole work, returning back to those original themes with Sunset over Gowrie Mountain. So it's very evocative. And I think for our audience also, it's very accessible for us as an orchestra, but it's going to be something that audiences can get. It's going to be something that audiences can sit there and go, I can hear the birds, and I can hear the busyness of the study, and I can just imagine the joy of the Carnival of Flowers and the parade that goes on. And so it's a beautiful work, not only written for our orchestra, but also written for Toowoomba audiences.
That is brilliant, and you're right, and that's the skill of a composer, is to be able to create something that does conjure up the right image just in the feeling of the music. It sounds wonderful. So, would you advise that people on the 22nd, should they get their tickets ahead of time or just buy them at the door?
No, please do get your tickets ahead of time from the Toowoomba Empire Theatre box office. You can phone them up, and you're looking for our program called Toowoomba Treats with the Toowoomba Concert Orchestra.
Fair enough. Hey, such a pleasure to have a chat to you this morning, Claire. Hope it goes well. Lovely to chat.
Thanks, David.